Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Arvind. Good evening. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show. Thank you so much for taking your time out to be a part of this show with me here today.
It's an absolute honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Likewise. Arvind, my first question is, an open-ended one. We'll talk about what you do, but before that, if we can, I'd love to know the person behind all those things, and even for our listeners, I think it'll help them connect really well. So, if you can walk us through your journey up until the point you decided to, become this guy who runs amazing workshops.
Wow, interesting this thing, because I can go back as long as you need, but I think
Please.
the most prevalent one was I started my professional life in IT. I joined as a developer, and I quickly realized that I'm not cut out for it. I have a lot of varied interests, so I thought I should go around exploring. I ended up doing some copywriting work, a lot of sales work, a lot of door-to-door sales as well, institutional sales. I did that, and then I had the opportunity to be a professor in Indore as well. So I was teaching marketing at that front. Came back, joined an agency, started my own storytelling agency in Bangalore. And after that, joined another edtech company called Jigsaw Academy back then. And, did a lot of marketing there. And in 2019, I set out on my own. And that was a very tumultuous journey. There was, when you're working in a job, you never learn all the hidden aspects of running a business. Things like accounting. I'm like, what is accounting? Why? Like, it's just paying me money. That's enough. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So bit the bullet and invested a lot of time and effort in learning things the hard way. And now I am running a lot of applied game design workshops where I'm using principles and psychology from video games. I've been a gamer since the age of like six and a half. So the past 30 years of all of that stuff, gamification and game design. To run workshops that are based on adventure games, as a fundamental framework. I do a lot of teaching as well, in the sense that I run open workshops, predominantly focused on marketing, because that's a core strength of mine, but it also allows for a lot of wiggle room in what I want to explore. So yeah, that's me, mate.
Great, Arvind. Thank you. But this was pretty brief, and it was like an outline, which is great. I wouldn't want to go back and talk about your stints, but then what I'd be interested in, Arvind, also from the podcast perspective, is your transition from where you're working for a fixed salary, and then you're moving on to something that's not the same anymore. There are a lot of aspects around this, right? First of all, there is a point of view where people decide that they want to be their own boss. They're tired with all the systems in place. Or there comes a time for someone who's saved up a lot of money, and and then they move on to the next phase to explore all of their interests.
Right.
So there are a lot of ways in which the transition happens. How was it for you? Was it boredom with what you were doing, or you thought that there's a lot of potential that is not being explored while working for a company?
Yeah, I wish I had such a noble and legendary reason to do something. Back in the day, I didn't know why, but now I know. I have ADHD. That means attention deficiency and hyperactivity disorder. I wish I had known this 30 years ago. I didn't. But one very positive upside of ADHD is that, in fact, I have a tattoo over here that says, learn, do, make, ship. Those 4 words that kind of encapsulates my life philosophy as well. So I was always on the thing about, hey, let me build out this side project and see how it goes. I run blogs, I've set up drop shipping, I've set up e-commerce websites. I've explored, pretty much all the stuff that there is about, how do you make money online? And back when I was starting out, I realized that pretty much everybody who was making money online was teaching people to make money online by teaching others how to make money online, right? Which
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
is bullshit, right? I do not want, I did not definitely want to be a part of that industrial complex, if you want to call it that. And I realized that, hey, I am phenomenal at learning things, and I really, really, and my favorite way to learn something is basically what my tattoo says: first learn something, right? And then do something with it, like apply it somewhere, and then turn it into a product, right? Or a service, whatever, and then ship, which is to release it out into the world and experiment and see what happens. Thanks to my ADHD, I was able to go through that cycle many, 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 many times, right? I've been doing that since 2011, 2010, if I recall correctly, which is back from my advertising days. And this cycle allowed me to level up very, very fast in this process. Caveat, even though I went through this process, there are many pitfalls, many monsters that I was not aware of until I actually struck out on my own, right? Like I mentioned, bookkeeping was one of them, but regulations and um, and the biggest the myth that many founders have, whether they are tech founders, knowledge founders, is I will build it and they shall come. Fortunately, that is not true, right? What you have to do is make stuff that people want. And so sell first, build later. So that was a lesson that I had learned. And in terms of how did I actually go from, like the most addictive thing on the planet, which is a monthly salary, to wondering, hey, can I make next month's EMI? That I started out the same way, right? I thought I had it all planned out. I was like, okay, I have like a 1 year savings. I even told my boss back then that, hey, I'm going to be quitting on March 31st, 2019. He's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, no, man, I really, really, really got to do this. And I did that. And April 1st, I did all the mistakes I potentially could. I had a fancy desk at WeWork. I had my visiting cards printed out. I had a website, but I didn't have any customers, right? So again, there are many iterations in figuring out each aspect. Then that's how I ended up. It was ridiculously difficult and scary because my wife, God bless the woman, she is very risk averse, right? And when I started out, I thought that entrepreneurs were risk takers. Now, 4 years later, and a lot of gray hair later, I understand that entrepreneurs are in fact the most risk averse, at least the kind of entrepreneur that I am, right? In the sense that we want to minimize downfall as much as possible and then work forward. So wisdom in 4 years. I hope that answered your question.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not a question that can be answered or an answer that can be said yes. It's just
This
you
has
got to
been my
make
path.
yes, exactly. You just got to make whatever you get out of it. But I've got plenty of questions still, which I will have my own way to understand that. I'm not going to put any pressure on you to
No sweat,
answer
babe.
a
No
certain
sweat.
way. But interesting that you said thanks to ADHD, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, because what you said, it didn't come across to me like it is done by somebody with, some sort of a condition. Because I
Mm-hmm.
see this around me.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you have to say thanks to ADHD? What's the link? Is what I'm trying to understand.
Okay. Uh, at the time of this recording, a year ago, I got diagnosed with ADHD. Right? I was in a very difficult place, and I found it very difficult to relate to neurotypical people. That is the terminology that's used, like people who don't have something like ADHD. And especially in India, there is a lot of stigma and a lack of knowledge and understanding of these sort of mental conditions. And I'm 37 now, right? And for 36 years of my life, I have been growing up thinking that I am broken. I messed up, right? But I was like looking at some other stuff. I'm like, wait, this is like ridiculously easy. Why can't you get it? But others didn't. So there was a great struggle to empathize with others and connect with others. But that it's a double-edged sword in a way, right? So that was the downside, if you want to call it that. But the positive was I could like pretty much anything, like be it programming, be it music, be whatever, new skills, new ideas, new topics. I was able to, and this is my mental model for this. I have like a knowledge mesh, right? So if you want to think of like nodes and connections, nodes and edges, I could very easily assimilate new things into this mental model of mine, into this knowledge mesh of mine, or a mesh of understanding. I think that's a better terminology. And that fundamental process of learning, where you see something, you internalize it, then you represent it or create something with it, really cemented this understanding. And that mental model, that process, has been greatly beneficial for me to level up as a founder. Because I don't, and this is again me hypothesizing here, but without this sort of an understanding, I don't think I would have been in this situation the way I am. Most people, most of the narrative that is there in public about ADHD is that, hey, it's an Achilles heel. Like, yes, it most certainly is, but it's you can turn it into an advantage as well. And I got lucky in that aspect.
Got it. Great. Arvindh, you also mentioned, while talking about your process of learn, do,
To
make, and
make
ship,
shit.
right?
Yes.
And after that, you said, you also mentioned that sell first and then make later.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard this a lot of times, but it's easier said than done. People still kind of struggle to wrap their heads around this concept. Can you, with an example, especially the audience of this podcast are mostly knowledge entrepreneurs, who are serving people in teaching them something, or building courses and selling them. So from that angle, if you have to deep dive a little bit and then, set out a high level process, can you do that, please?
Yeah. I would love to take an example of something that I just shipped out recently.
Okay.
I was trying to build out a workshop in terms of accelerated learning using visual frameworks, right? I'm a very visual guy. I love learning. So I was like, hey, how can we package this together and sell it for money, right? So prior to all of this, I have been a part of, I have a following on Twitter, and that is where I do all of my validation, right? At a high level, the process goes like this. You come up with an idea, and then, you kind of flesh it out. You try to figure out, and again, going back to my put the player first framework. It's a framework that I built using role-playing game elements and adventure elements and the hero's journey and the monomyth. And the idea is that in any business, you are not the hero, right? As a founder, you're not the hero. The customer is the hero. And the customer, they're trapped in a broken world, a world that is messed up, right? And that is their present status quo. The reason it's messed up is because there are monsters in the way. They want to get to paradise, but these monsters are stopping them. And now translating that to business speak, the customer, their present status quo is messed up, but they want a world, a future time where they don't have these problems, but these problems are in the way. Then you come in as the guide, right? And you have a superpower. And what you do is you give the hero, the customer, different weapons that they can use to defeat these monsters. And then you send them out on quests. As the heroes go through their quests, they defeat these monsters, they level up, and they gain some loot as well. Again, translating that to business speak, as a founder, you have a unique selling proposition and you create different products. And in the case of knowledge entrepreneurs, it could be ebooks, it could be audiobooks, it could be courses, it could be workshops, it could be anything and everything that you can use to package your information. You give your customer these weapons and they use it to solve their problems. Right? And as they solve their problems, they gain extrinsic rewards, that is loot, as well as they undergo a transformation internally as they level up. This is pure video game terminology. Yeah. I'm a gamer. I love this. I'm like Diablo 4 just came out. I'm just itching to go and play. But this is the philosophy, right? So coming back to this, when you're starting out as a knowledge entrepreneur and trying to build this, and if you're trying to apply this, your initial answers to all of these things, which you're going to be doing on a piece of paper, would be assumptions, right? And assumptions are the thing that are going to trip you out the most. They're the ones, because when you're going into a market and you're saying that, hey, I know this skill, so I'm going to be teaching them the skill, that's a great starting point. But what you want to do is you want to get your answers to the questions like, who is the customer? What is, what are the problems that they have? What are the second order impact? And then, what is the future paradise that they want? What are the things that you can create to help them solve these problems? What kind of rewards are your customers going to get? And what is the transformation, right? Now, this sounds complex, but it's pretty straightforward, right? There's no complexity. So taking this, you have this paper with assumptions, which are your answers to these questions. And then you want to start validating. You do not want to go and start building these weapons. You do not want to build out your course or your PDF or any of that. What you want to do first is you want to set up calls with prospects. The way that you and I are chatting right now, you can do the same thing. How I did that on Twitter was I found out specific people that I wanted to talk to. I spoke to one guy in Russia who was like, this is again, for the accelerated learning workshop. He'd been tweeting something about learning and stuff like that. So I spoke to one Russian who's living in the US. I spoke to them. I spoke to a couple of people in India. I spoke to a couple of people in Japan as well, because again, I'm trying to sell globally, right? And what I did was, and this is my actual, I'm very, very happy to share this, is I recorded these calls. And what I did was I got the transcripts out. Of course, this was with their permission. And after I got the transcripts, I went and analyzed. In the beginning, like earlier when I used to do it, I had to do it manually, but I have a great ChatGPT prompt that's helping me pull out all of these. And by the time I was done with that, just with 4 calls, I identified 42 potential problems that I could solve. Imagine that, 42 different. Now, this is a fantastic thing, which is backed by, hey, there is this problem, these customers, these are people I want to solve. I'm getting a little bit ahead. So this is one step, right? But if you want to go down a different node, what you would do is in these calls, you want to explore the problem space. In my case, it was, hey, how do you manage your knowledge, right? How often do you spend time learning? What is your learning process like? How do you take notes? How do you get wisdom from these notes? These were the kind of questions I was asking these people. And what I was trying to do in these calls is, remember those assumptions I had in the beginning? I'm trying to validate whether they're true or not. And in these calls, I am actively trying to kill my product, right? There's a guy on Twitter called Daniel Vasallo, and he has this fantastic line, right? It's ideas are cattle. As knowledge entrepreneurs, and I am one of those, I fear that, oh, my idea is precious, right? And it is. I've been through that loop, if you will. But once we realize that it is not about us, but it's about the customer and what we can deliver for them, it becomes significantly easier. So I go on these calls, I ask them questions to validate my assumptions. Once that's done, I'm like, okay, so I've identified that these are the problems on all these aspects that are written down as assumptions, they're correct. Then comes the development part, or the solutioning part, right? So first is the problem, and then you go to the solution. Once I validated that the problem exists and people would be willing to pay for it, then I start designing the solution. Now, when it comes to designing the solution, the transcripts of the calls, the insights that you can get from these are very, very valuable. But beyond that, I also have to marry these insights with my own strengths or talent stack. I'm comfortable on video. My mom says I have a face for radio as well, and a voice. So that was a joke, by the way. Yes, I do crack dad jokes like this. But when I realized that, hey, these are the things that I enjoy, right? And these are the things that I'm good at, I can put this together to solve for a validated problem. Now, as I'm building this, I do 2 things. First, I get a landing page up, right? And what that means is I start talking about the product, start talking about the problem and the potential solution that I can deliver, right? And then I start promoting it. I share them in links in DMs. I use Twitter and whatever other means I have for distribution. And again, that's another litmus test to see if people are biting or not. And that's the first thing I do. The second thing is I build it in public. And what that means is I give consistent updates on the progress of this solution that I'm building, right? So what that would mean is, hey, I finished the outline, this is what it looks like. And, I am trying to test out, this Riverside, right, to figure out how I can do interviews for this course. So every single update that I'm giving on the development of this product, I am very subtly plugging in the final product that I'm going to be selling as well, right? So it's like marketing without marketing. And I continue doing that. And finally, when it comes to the launch month or the launch week, what ends up happening is I would have enlisted support of beta readers, students, whatever you want to call it, right? So I would have given them free course access, and I'll ask them for testimonials, reviews, stuff like that. And on launch day, I'll tell them, like, hey, I've just launched this. It would be great if you could give me a boost. They do that, perhaps even set up an affiliate system to generate the revenue that I might need. And yeah, that's the process. It is It's a modification of the double diamond approach to design thinking, right? Where you start with a problem, then you diverge to find, explore the problem space. And then based on different parameters, you converge upon a definition of the problem. Then again, you diverge to explore the solution space. Then again, you converge to arrive at a solution that could work. And then the rest is all marketing.
Awesome.
Ooh, yeah.
First of all, I don't know why was it a joke. You do have the voice for radio, so that's the reason I was a little off. Whoa, okay, I mean, why is it a joke? Okay, so and great. This was as straight and as black and white as it can get. Just a few questions to make it even easier for my audience. You said Thank you so much for clarifying that you validated your ideas by getting on calls individually with just four people. And you found 42 problems that could be addressed.
I just want to clarify that a little bit.
Sure.
I have done upwards of 20 calls for one product. But that point was to highlight that from just speaking to four people, I got 42 ideas. Yeah.
Got it. It's still 20 is still, why? Because when we explore the topic of sell first, build later, the biggest blockage that comes for people, there are some people who've told, build an audience base of at least 200 before you can start validating. Now, if you can reach out one-on-one, you don't have this blockage, right? You can just go and... So what I wanted to clarify was that I'm assuming you reached out to them on Twitter DMs?
Correct.
Great. Does it matter you have a certain amount of audience before you do that? Some sort of a credibility?
Absolutely no. I'll tell you why as well. There is another guy on Twitter called Ayush Tweets Here. That's his handle on Twitter. And he gave me a very good framework that anybody can use. And this logic can be applied to LinkedIn as well, as far as, I think about it. When you have like 0 to like a very small audience, and that number changes as to what's a small audience, you start off by being the reply guy, right? So you don't have to create content. You spend 100% of your time building these inroads, these relationships by replying and interacting with other people's content. On Twitter, you would end up following them and, commenting on them and, attending their spaces, essentially whatever you can do to support them. Then once your audience grows a little bit, then what you do is you don't just do the replying bit, right? For 100% of the time, you probably drop it down to about 90. And the 10% of the time you spend in uplifting others, right? Like, hey, I'm going to retweet this stuff, or I'm going to add more to the conversation, stuff like that. And finally, once your audience grows even bigger, then you can start by, like if you want to plug in your own products, your own stuff, you could probably start doing that. But throughout this process, as long as you are able to have a good conversation with people on Twitter, it is very easy to ascend that relationship, to deepen it, right? Because you kind of deposited that goodwill in that relationship and you can withdraw it, or perhaps you could deposit even more by saying, hey, I really like this tweet about, such and such thing. Could we get on a call to talk about this a little bit more? Right. So that's one way of doing it. Another way, and I recommend this to pretty much every founder I meet, is to read the book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. I think it's over here somewhere. Again, he gives like templates and scripts that you can use to have conversations with people for these validation, these things. So that helps as well.
Amazing. Thank you for this information. Now getting to the grunt part, right? Now you said you got on 20 calls. I'm sure 20 DMs is not going to cut that, right? So how many people did you have to reach out for you to get 20 calls? Roughly.
I probably about 50 or 60.
That's amazing response rate, right? I mean, it's more than like close to 35%. That's great.
I must again, clarify that or delineate that by saying that these are people I've been interacting with for over a year and a half, right? So, and then that is there. Plus, I have also established a lot of credibility in this audience space by creating content away for free. I created a full course called Marketing for Builders or Marketing for Founders, and over 400 people have downloaded it and they've been going through it, right? And that has given some sort of like that's the initial deposit of goodwill That's one thing. Second thing is I have an email list as well. It's not a big list. It's about some 200 people at the time of recording. But
Right.
I send out an email every single day, and over 30%, 35% open it. And what that means is every single day, at least 70 people are opening and they're consuming what I have to share. And every single day, I'm giving them one specific tip to grow their marketing engines. So I'm building up that credibility. And then eventually I'm asking for a withdrawal by asking something from them.
Awesome. It's still, thanks for not telling that, oh, you know what, I've been here from 1.5 years, I've built credibility and stuff like that. It's always easier to come back. It's still, I mean, if you still do not have credibility, for the people who are listening, Arvind has taken 1.5 years to kind of build credibility, but that doesn't have to be the same for everyone. You can
It
still
doesn't.
start DMing with 0 followers.
Absolutely.
And then maybe if Arvind has reached out to 60 people and has got 20 calls, you might have to reach out to 100 people and get a couple of calls, which is still a win. But it's a start somewhere. And so given that you have something to offer, might as well make it to a course, and like Arvind said, put it out for free to build that credibility. And I think giving out value is one of the most easiest ways to start off. But still, Arvind, I have to say that amongst among all the ideas and among all the times that I've explored sell first, build later, this piece of conversation with you has come out the most doable, with the
Awesome.
most least resistance. Thank you for that. Okay.
Super.
And you said you spoke about building in public. I just had
Mhm.
another question. How much to divulge and how much to hold back? Is
Okay.
that a yeah?
Yeah. So great question, by the way. The thing is that I learned a lot about building in public from Twitter. There is this one fantastic guy called Kevon. He's from Hong Kong, and he is Meet Kevon on Twitter. I was recently a course assistant for a cohort-based course that he was running. And with that disclaimer aside, when it comes to building in public, right, the number one piece of advice that Kevon gives, and I highly subscribe to it, is to realize that, and this is an example that he uses, right? Twitter is like it's not a broadcasting platform. It is a conversations platform, right? So it's like a group chat on WhatsApp, right? That's
Right.
what he talks about. The same thing can be applied to other platforms as well. Now, that being said, a good rule of thumb that you could use to figure out, hey, how much can I share about this, right? How much would you want to share to a colleague or not your best friend, but that the friend of a friend? What would you want to share? So that is one good question that you could use to identify that. There are people who share their revenue numbers, who share their code snapshots and stuff like that. That is an option as well. Personally, I like to infuse a lot of personality. I talk about the perils of not being able to shave every day, right? So you're seeing this pretty face. That's because I went to the barbershop today, right? So I would share stuff like that as well. Or day before yesterday, I had a corporate workshop and that didn't go as well as I had wanted. I would share that as well. It is not just about sharing the ups and downs. It's not just about sharing the milestones, but it's about documenting what's your entire journey. And the real art comes in how can you tie this documentation to two things. One, the product that you're building right now, and two, that overall philosophical war that you're waging, right? So let me clarify and unpack that a little bit. As a marketing workshops guy, right? It's not just marketing, but I have that M star for marketing. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is that my audience, which is defined as solo indie developers, right? Like individual techies who love to build stuff, like devs, right? They hate marketing. For them, marketing is a bad word, right? And my overarching mission is to get these people to love marketing as much as I do. Now, for me, whatever I'm doing has to tie back to that mission as well. So I keep that in mind.
Great. Uh, Arvind, I'd like to go back a little bit in
Mm-hmm.
your timeline, uh, just to be able to relate to maybe a little bit of developer people if they
Mm-hmm.
happen to tune in. You said you started off as a developer and
Mm-hmm.
then you moved towards sales and marketing and
Sales.
stuff
Yep.
like that, which is very contrasting, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are like two ends of a spectrum. So how did that happen? Like, what is the story behind that?
Oh, that's a fun one. I was in this company called Tesco HSC.
Okay.
And this was back in the day when CSS was like brand new, right? So when
Right.
I joined, they were saying that, okay, you have to make these websites at some internal tool. We had to make it with tables, right? I'm like, no, man, I just learned CSS. I want to do it. And, I started learning and I started applying. But unfortunately, again, my ADHD kicked in and I got like really, really bored within like, I think it was what, like 6 months, maybe 7 months. And I was like, hey, I can speak, I can write, so I should probably go and try something else. So that actually led to a lot of job hopping. And if anybody goes and checks me out on LinkedIn, the longest job I've held is less than 2 years. I just couldn't do it, right? So, and that natural affinity, that natural inclination to learn new things helped me out in this regard. Because I was like, hey, yeah, I can do this, no problem. Sales, no problem. Zig Ziglar, here I come. So that kind of stuff happened.
Got it. Arvind, please excuse me if I'm being insensitive or whatever, but this is out
Mm-hmm.
of curiosity, right? We've
Sure, sure,
spoken
sure.
about ADHD has been a bit of a topic in our
Mm-hmm.
conversation here. I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean to be anything, but just to learn more about it,
Sure,
right?
sure, sure. Go on. This is absolutely no
Is it
problem.
is it important? How
Mm-hmm.
important is it to know that if somebody has ADHD or not? Does
Ah,
it
very
matter?
good question. So, have you seen the movie The Matrix?
Yes, I have.
The first
Long
one,
time back.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, in the room of the Oracle, when Neo goes to meet the Oracle, on the top of her kitchen door, there is this Latin phrase, temet nosce, right? Which essentially is a rough, or I hope I'm getting this right, which means to know yourself, right? Now, the
Okay.
reason why I talk about ADHD and why it is an important thing is because until I got diagnosed, I thought I was broken. I thought I was a failure. I thought that, hey, everybody
Mm,
else is better than I am, right? But more importantly, in the context of your question, knowing who you are, right? Like truly knowing who you are makes a big difference in the way that you see the world. If I'm
right.
calling myself, identity-based outcomes, right? So identity-based change. If I'm calling myself a cyclist, then I will be cycling. Like so that is my new form of my identity. I'm not going to try and fight it, but I'm going to work with it. If I did, and this was, until 36, I did not know that I had ADHD. So I was trying the methods and techniques that neurotypical people were trying. And I was like, oh man, why isn't this working? My friends were like, it's okay, you can do it, it'll happen. It doesn't. It's just that I'm wired differently. But the relevance of this to everybody who's listening and watching is this. When you know what your strengths are, when you know what your weaknesses are, when you know where you excel, and when you know where you need help, you can design your life, you can design your business around that. I'm not
Right.
saying that this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's just that this is it, right? Like this is the situation, this is the reality. And when you're being pragmatic in that fashion, you can go ahead and work around this. You can leverage the stuff that's good, you can offset the stuff that is bad, and hey, that makes a big difference.
Got it. Another question related to this. Now,
Mm-hmm,
you must have, when you say, you got diagnosed with
mm-hmm,
ADHD, it's slightly a problematic thing, right? It's not a good thing for people to get diagnosed of anything, for that matter.
mm-hmm.
At least in the way that we use the word in our everyday interactions. So
Sure.
you must have probably seen something was not working with you, and
Mm-hmm,
hence you kind of went ahead and checked yourself or whatever.
mm-hmm.
What were those things? What were
Ah,
those exact things that made you feel, okay, something is wrong?
right. So, great question, by the way. And I'm really glad that we're talking about this because uh, mental conditions don't get spoken about as often as I would like. The thing is that sticking to something, right? That has been my biggest challenge, right? So, uh, the job hopping, the myriad of hobbies that I have, the myriad of skills I have, the tattoo that I have, right? It all points to this one thing that hey, I can't, I can't stick to one thing. Now, when I'm running a business, it's very different than at a job. Where in a job, and I'm just going to be brutally honest, right? There are because of my ability to understand my strengths and my weaknesses, I could get by performing at like 20%, 30% capacity and still deliver those sort of outputs. I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone, but for me personally, that was that situation. Now, when that behavior carried over to my business, suddenly I was my own boss, right? And I don't have the monthly paycheck, but I do have a monthly EMI. And that situation, it was I was in a bad place where things were not working as well as they would need to be. I knew that there were things I had to do, such as, hey, I need to go file my GST returns, or I need to send these things to my accountant, right? But trivial tasks. And the way I was facing all of these challenges made me very restless. And I started searching for answers online. In the beginning, when I was searching for like I was putting in my symptoms into Google, which by the way is a absolutely horrible thing to do because it is a rabbit hole you do not want to go into. I fortunately stumbled upon a bunch of YouTube videos called How to ADHD. And the first time I saw the video from that lady, Jessica McCabe, if I got her name right, I was like, oh my God, that is me. And I still remember, I think it was like about maybe 4 days of binge watching where I was like, oh, this is me. Now, that being said, I'm probably painting this as a very negative thing. It's not. There are periods of hyper focus where I have churned out is the wrong word. I have crafted like 100 plus videos in a week. And I've shipped that out. I have gone like 48-hour design sprints. I've done things like that as well, which might sound inhuman and impossible. But again, hyperfocus is one of the traits of ADHD. Now, again, it manifests in different ways for different people. And what ended up happening was I was in that point where it was hampering the way that I could do business, right? And again, it manifests in different ways for different people, and they might be experiencing this in different ways. Executive dysfunction, right? Like where you know that you have to do something. Like I know that I have to send this thing to Mr. Vijay, let's say. I haven't sent that email. It's going to take me like maybe 30 seconds to send that email, and I haven't done it. So I try to cope by, again, applying gamification. How can I gamify my life, right? So I had like a full-on RPG built for myself where, I would gain experience points and I could spend them on loot and stuff like that, all of these things. It still didn't work, right? Because I was struggling. So that's when I found this thing. I discovered that I might have ADHD. I went to a local, what was that? Mind and Brain Hospital. And I spoke to a counselor there. They referred me to a psychologist and a psychiatrist. They spoke to me. They ran some tests. These tests are not like, oh, I'm going to open your brain and look at stuff. No, it's not that. These are assessments that they ask you to do. They have conversations. And then they give different ways of managing this, right? So you can take medication. You may choose not to take medication. And depending on what you want to do, you go ahead and do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this. The reason I asked you this question is two reasons. One is obviously, I'd love to know the person behind whatever you're doing, because that paints the full picture, right? Why and or what and why do you do whatever you do? And the second reason I asked you is a lot of people might be experiencing same things, but they may not have the awareness to kind of stop and examine, right? And when you say the exact things, somebody might relate, and things
empathy,
might
empathy.
Yeah, exactly. It clicks. Great. Now my next question is this. Now, after this knowledge of you having ADHD, how did you turn that as a strength point for you,
right?
Especially doing business, right?
Yeah. So as a married man, the number one stakeholder I have is not myself, but my wife, right? And my daughter. And the first thing I did after I found out was I told my family, and they didn't get it, right? They're like, what is wrong with you? Nothing. You go just do work, go pray, everything. I'm like, sure. So, but what happened was the moment I got diagnosed, right? And what ended up happening was that I got like a massive sense of understanding. Actually, no, before that, I was pissed off. I was like, how, what? Like, look, what happens is that it's like you're playing chess, but suddenly you don't have like 2 knights and you've been playing the whole game. That's a disaster, right? So I'm like, I've been going through life like this. Like so much of rage and anger that happened. And then it took some time. By time, I mean like a week, maybe 10 days or something. And then there was a lot of sorrow as well. Like, oh man, I wasted so much of time. Imagine if I'd known this back in 2006, I would have been like able to stick to that job, and, I wouldn't have to do this. I'd probably be like an IT architect or something. That happened. And then wisdom or acceptance kicked in. I'm like, all right, you know what? It is what it is, like my friend Vikram says. And I have to, go forward with it. After that acceptance happened, then I spoke to my wife. I tried to explain. She didn't get it. My parents didn't get it. I'm like, that's okay. At least now I know what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And I started looking back at that time, and I noticed that there were certain patterns in what I was doing. Some patterns were that, for example, like I needed to change my desk space often, like maybe every month or something. I would change my desk from over here to over there, change the backdrop. I'm like, you know what? That's okay, But now instead of beating myself over it, I got that acceptance. That was one thing. Other thing was my primary working method, if you want to call it, like my system, right? So I take a lot of notes, and most people on this knowledge entrepreneurs, they're probably going to be building out their second brain. They probably have a Zettelkasten, whatever. So I've been switching from, let's say, Obsidian to Notion to Logseek to Chrome to Bear, all of these things, right? And I used to fight that a lot. Now I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's okay. I also figured out certain techniques that I can use to cope with this and still run my business. First one was setting up a mastermind group. And what I mean by that is I and 3 other friends who are also solo founders, we have a fortnightly meeting, right? A 1 hour mastermind, 1.5 hour mastermind meeting. And personally, I like to work in sprints, right? So that's another thing, because there is enough variety as well that happens. So, I plan out the sprint, I do a retro, all of those things that happen. And then when it came to productivity, again, I use a method called the autofocus method, where the idea is, it's going to sound ludicrous, but it works wonderfully for me. I have like every sprint, I plan out like, hey, these are the different tasks that I need to do. In the next 14 days, I have to finish out these tasks. But I don't plan them in my calendar. Every morning I open up, I just scan through the list. I'm like, yeah, this sounds fun. I'm going to do this today. So there's always variety that kicks in. And when I'm done with a task, I scratch it out, and therefore, I move on to the next task. Going back to the mastermind group, right? Another benefit is that we also have a Zoom call, because we're all working remotely. It's like an office minus the politics, but we have the gossip, right? So that's there too. So we log on, and then, we just say in the beginning of the call, like, okay, I'm going to be working on this for the next 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever. So that happens. And like 2 or 3 of them are also in Bangalore. So, I'm in Bangalore. So we go work together in Starbucks or something. And, so that's another thing that's happened. But I also found that because of my ADHD, I love learning, I love teaching. I am also charismatic, right? So what ended up happening was I've tried to find this sort of a profession, this sort of a vocation, I don't know what you call it, right? A job where I can leverage this as a positive thing. So now if I have to do marketing consulting, it is not fun for me. Okay. Hear me out. I know potential clients, if you're listening, it's a fact, right? So I can't hold down a job. I can't work on something for a long time. So what I've decided to do is, for my consulting work, I've taken on only projects. So I'm not going to be on retainer. I will come in as a specialist, as a facilitator, or as a consultant. I will solve this problem and I'll get out, right? So it gives me a lot of freedom. There's a finite end date, which really helps with my ADHD, and I get to keep on like swapping clients as well, right? So that's another thing that I try. So I figured out like, okay, how can I work with my natural tendencies instead of working against them? So that's there. And final thing is knowledge work, right? Knowledge entrepreneurship is a fantastic way, because, hey, like let's say that I'm obsessing about email marketing right now, right? In the next 2 to 4 weeks, I can create an entire course around it. And after it's done, I can move on to the next project. So my need for variety, my need for motivation and stimulation is taken care of as well. So this have been my approaches.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing these in such depth. I love the autofocus thing. You have your task, just see what interests you at that moment, and then go with it. Great. Arvind, now I'm just going to go back to another thing you said, because video games, I read your website, video games are there everywhere. That seems to be the basis on which you built a lot of things. I've got a couple of questions, but then before that, I'd like to go back. You said you're playing games since the age of 6. Yes. When did it really occur to you that you could probably use these games as as a tool or as a weapon to do whatever you're doing now?
I love sharing this story. And that's kind of the heart behind the put the player first framework as well, right? I started working in 2006 with a bunch of others, and we were all in the same batch at Tesco and all of that, right? So a couple of years later, when we were meeting up, right, I had moved on to other jobs. And I was meeting these people, right? It was 2011. I was newly married at the time. And there was one person who was going abroad for a vacation. Somebody else, she was building a house. A third person, she had bought a car. And all I had was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful bullet to my name. I called her Tamanna, and my wife, right? And I probably had like about 40,000 rupees in my bank account. And I'm looking at these people, they're like rich, man. And I was like broke. Advertising does not pay, by the way. And what ended up happening was I was like, oh my God, I have to catch up with that. And I decided, all right, you know what? I'm going to do it. So at that time, I went and joined NIIT. Okay, of all things, I joined NIIT to learn like Linux and stuff like that. And I was like, I was like getting up at 5 a.m. I was, doing exercise and all of that. And that system, it stuck like for about maybe 10 days, 14 days. And then I started slipping a little bit here, a little bit there. And one day it just started to crash. But unfortunately, instead of crashing it where it was before, I just shot through, right? I just hit like rock bottom. I started like everything in my life started going wrong, and it was like one nasty spiral, right? And at that time, the only place where I was having success and happiness and a sense of achievement was when I was playing Diablo 3, right? So fantastic game where I'm running around killing monsters. And, my addiction to that gaming thing at that point became so bad that I started avoiding bunking work. I started avoiding taking baths. I started not talking to anybody. I became a hermit almost, right? And I still remember it's probably like about 2:33 in the morning. I have work, but I'm like, you know what? Chuck it. My wife is sleeping in their room. Doesn't matter. I paused the game because I'm playing solo, and I opened the fridge, right? Now, here's the thing. If you've ever been up late at night, the first time you open the fridge, right, the bar for what is acceptable as a midnight snack is very high. But as time goes on, that bar drops. And at
Yes.
3 in the morning, I was sitting in the hall sofa shoveling cobre, that's like cold, desiccated coconut, into my mouth. And I'm like, I don't know, some epiphany happened. I'm staring at the screen, and there was my witch doctor just leveled up. I'm like, what the hell am I doing, right? And then an immediate flash of epiphany. Hey, wait a second. What if my life was like that game, Diablo 3? And that, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it right now. And that began my journey, right? So I still remember I paused the game. I didn't close it because I was in a dungeon. And what I did was I was trying to, like I had those notepads, and I was trying to sketch out like, okay, this would be my skill tree. This would be my main stats, and, whatever, right? Like how would my life be? What would be the different missions and stuff? Like it started then. This was almost like a decade, like 12 years ago, right? But version 1 didn't work, version 2 didn't work. And as I was going through this, there was a meta level up that needed to do, right? And that's what most of these books are about. I started studying game design. I started studying psychology. I started studying cognitive behavior. I started studying motivation techniques. I started, how do I do system design, right? A whole host. And again, like, my proclivity, my preference to learn stuff was like super useful. And I'd gone down this rabbit hole, and I was like, hey, okay, you know what? Let's figure this out. Went on for about 7 years, maybe 8 years, until I figured out that, hey, this is like, this whole thing started off as a way of me being able to turn my life into a video game, right? Like how awesome would that be? Then I discovered, hey, this is called gamification. All that happened. But after I struck out and all of these things, and then I finally realized that, hey, having an idea is great, having this knowledge is great, but it's not necessarily monetizable, right? So even though the put the player first framework is designed as a framework to help companies, build products that customers want, it is in fact a framework for growth, right? Because any journey that anybody is going to go on, any journey of growth or transformation, has the same template. From Star Wars to Kung Fu Panda to The Matrix to the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, all of these things, right? When you look at them, they have the strong, like the standard template. But you add in that video game benefits, like the leveling up, the loot, the rewards, the weapons, and that's sort of a reframe. It makes things very, very powerful. Finally, when I decided to monetize it, and I was struggling to monetize it, I had this thing. I started off with this thing called Greatness Through Games, where I'm trying to coach individuals. I think Mr. Matthew Verghese, who was a guest on the show, he's a personal development coach as well. Yeah. He was in Toastmasters. I was in Toastmasters too.
Okay.
I lost to him, but I'm still a little bit salty in the improv. This thing. So Matthew, you're saying hi. But my journey through Toastmasters was powered by that framework. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's do this. So I applied, and finally figured out, okay, monetize. So yeah, that's how it happened.
Awesome. A fun fact for you.
Mhm.
Do you know about the world of esports?
I used to be a shoutcaster for StarCraft 2. What that
Okay.
means is, like, how cricket matches have commentary.
Commentary. Yeah.
I
Oh,
used to give
okay.
commentary for esports.
Wow. Okay.
StarCraft 2.
Do you know that people make money playing games? I'm
I
sure you
do.
do. Okay. Did
I
you give it a shot?
I did. In fact, in college, this is back like 2002 to 2006, games like Counter-Strike was very popular. And there was this other game called Ragnarok Online.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You played it?
No,
No.
the only two games that I've played are Road Rash, which if I get a chance, I'll still
It
play.
is awesome.
I love those dirt bikes. And then the other game
Huh?
that I enjoyed was Condition Zero, Counter Strike Condition Zero, all the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice. So
those are the
we
only
used
two
to have
games.
these competitions in college, right? So I would go for the best manager competitions and I would go for the gaming competitions. And with the
Right.
earnings from that, I bought my first bullet. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
The reason I spoke to you about this was I had a guest. His name
Mhm,
is Adarsh.
mhm.
He runs a company called Gaming Geeks,
Okay.
and you know what they do?
I'm
They
not familiar with them, unfortunately.
train kids on games.
Oh, nice.
One of the games that he spoke about is called Valerie or Valerie or
Valorant.
Valorant. Yeah, I'm so
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a pretty thing.
And there's
Yeah.
another game, and they have coaches from across the world
hmm
teaching kids in
hmm
India. Can you imagine? Like,
I
I was like, what? I know people go to go to tuitions for subjects,
yeah.
man. What is happening here? There are
Believe it or
tuitions for
not, this is a massive phenomenon in like South Korea, right?
okay,
There, I still remember the story. In fact, there's a documentary on Netflix,
right.
free to play, I think. In South Korea, when the national team is going for the World Cup of football, you know
Mhm.
what they did to motivate them? They brought in esports superstars, okay, to motivate the world football team from South Korea to say, you can do it. I was like, holy cow, how is this even happening? But yeah, man, different places, different cultures, different values.
Yeah, it's the money involved in that is like
Massive.
100x. Yeah, it's like
Yes.
crazy. And well, that's another topic for another day. But since you spoke about the games, I just couldn't resist myself
Mhm.
thinking. I thought you'd
Yeah,
probably be interested. Um, Arvind, another thing that I want to touch upon, I'm going to come
Mhm.
back to this gamify
Sure,
thing,
sure.
right? There's so much
Anytime,
that I
mate.
want to
No problem.
totally ask. But before that, did you mention that you told your boss a year in advance that you're going to quit?
4 months in
Oh,
advance.
4 months. I'm so sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Could you? I just want to touch upon this topic.
hmm
If there's a certain, what was the thought process behind? Because it's usually the most common way of quitting jobs is maybe write an email
hmm
and then say that I'm putting my papers down and stuff. But why
Yeah,
4 months ahead? Was it because of the relationship that you had, or was it some sort of
precisely.
a gamification? Okay.
No. I was fortunate to find bosses like Gaurav,
Hmm.
Sarita, and Sushma, right? So Gaurav and Sarita, they were the co-founders of Jigsaw Academy, and Sushma was my boss at the time.
Right.
Three of the nicest people, and Sushma was an amazing taskmaster who got me to get stuff done, right? So kudos. But I had a very good relationship with them, right? And I was there with them during critical periods of Jigsaw Academy's growth, and it's like, Macha, I have to do this. So I'm, just giving you a heads up because I was also a person of certain skills and strengths, and finding people at that position as a head of marketing could be challenging. So therefore, I wanted to give them enough of a heads up.
Got it. Great. Uh, Arvind, I've got a set of questions about the way you do your workshops. I'm going to
Sure,
come
sure.
to that in a bit. But before that, I'd like to, I have a specific example which I'll come to. But
hmm
I'd like you to, you were talking about gamifying so many things, and then, you had
hmm
different versions, and then you kind of dove deep into the world of game design and stuff. Can you
hmm
give a very simple, there are a lot of things that people struggle with.
hmm
Common things like, it could be weight loss or waking up
Yeah.
on time. People have difficulty waking up early in the morning and stuff like that. Can you take one
hmm
example like this? And how can
hmm
people gamify into achieving this?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm really happy that I gamified was led to my 99 kilometer cycle ride. Okay. I have done a 99-kilometer cycle ride. I'm 6'4", 120 kilos now, but I still manage that.
You're 6'4". Okay,
I'm
awesome.
6'4". Yes, the camera reduces the height a bit. But the way I managed to do this was like this. Again, using the put the player first framework to explain, right? I was the hero there. And my broken world is that I am fat, I am heavy, I'm overweight. I start breathing like a vacuum cleaner if I just have to climb up 2 floors, right? So that was my broken world. But my paradise was a place where I could run and keep up and play with my daughter, right? When she's playing around, we're playing frisbee or something. But
Yeah.
along the way, I had certain monsters that I had to fight. One was I have a very strong love for junk food. I love, I love being lazy, just sitting on the computer and not necessarily, getting up. I do not enjoy exercise. I have, again, my ADHD kicks in where I'm saying that, hey, I can't. It's okay. Building habits is like ridiculously difficult.
Yeah.
So these were the monsters, right? But in this situation, I had to be my own guide, right? And my superpower was that, hey, I'm a gamer, so let's figure this out. So the couple of weapons that I had designed for myself, first was a mutation deck. Okay, it sounds cool, and it is, because a deck of cards has 52 cards in it, right?
Yeah.
So what I did was I actually developed a list of 52 different ways I could do the same task. So some examples were while closing my left eye, or while trying to beat a certain time limit. So when you're playing video games, you have mutations, right? Especially in like Street Fighter, where you have like double health, or like double the monsters,
Right.
or stuff like that. So I imposed artificial conditions in this mutation deck. So every morning when I had to do my exercise, it would be a novel experience, right? So I would take one card from the deck. Oh, it's a 7 of diamonds. Oh, I have to do this while singing a song or something like that, right? So the
Cool.
entire cycle ride, I would be singing songs, extremely dirty, full item number songs, but I am letting it out, right? And I'm like singing and I'm doing this. So every single day, it was a different experience. That was one. Second thing is, I know that I am extremely motivated by rewards, right? Like extrinsic rewards, such as, oh, you know what? I need a new Red Dragon Kumara 552 keyboard. Okay, if I can do 50 kilometers, I'm going to get that for myself. So that was one milestone. If I hit 100 kilometers, I would have got myself a lazy boy, right? So these are the kind of rewards that I set to motivate myself as well. Extrinsic motivation is phenomenal to overcome inertia, but it's not sustainable in the long term, right? So I tried that. Then I used streaks, right? So if I hit a 15-day streak, then I could treat myself to Natural's tender coconut ice cream, right? It's counterproductive, but I'm like, hey, it's Natural's ice cream. So I set up another system like that. And I also roped in a buddy of mine who lives nearby. Told him like, Macha, I'll come to your house at 6 a.m. We will go cycling from his house to MG Road. So I'm staying in Sahakar Nagar. So from my place to his place was about 10 kilometers. And from his place to MG Road was another 10 kilometers. So I would end up doing 40 kilometers in one day in the morning. So I'd get up and then I'd do that. Other thing I also did was environment design, where I know that there are certain things that are not going to work for me. So I uninstalled Netflix from my phone. I had to do a couple of these things, right? So I uninstalled Netflix, Prime Video, all of those things, so that I would actually go to sleep on time. Yeah. So, and then I made this like, okay, at each milestone, I'm going to be beating this. And then to solve all of these things, I have these rewards. And yeah, that's pretty much how I did it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Yeah, no sweat.
I think people just have to, I just got an idea or a flavor of what is gamifying a certain activity. I'm sure you can do it in 100 different ways, suiting to your own interests and stuff like that. So probably people can just go and search for gamify this for me, gamify that for me. I think they should get a lot of options.
I have something better. So gamification is the art of building a game-like experience. It is not about turning it into a game. All right. There will be certain limitations that we have to work with in the real world. If people want to learn this, Yukai Chao has written a fantastic book called Actionable Gamification. That's a great book to read up. Another author I would recommend is Dr. Jane McGonigal. She's written books like Reality is Broken and Super Better. And that's, again, a fantastic set of books to read. And to learn more about the aspects of game design, there is a book by Jesse Schell that's called Game Design, A Book of Lenses. That's, again, a fantastic book to learn how to design games, and you can apply that thinking.
Awesome, Arvindh. Thank you so much. Also,
Mm-hmm.
now, for you to, gamify something, how
Mm-hmm.
important is it to be, say, for example, would it be fair if I asked you, hey, can you build a quick and a dirty gamification technique for people who are trying to quit smoking?
Mm-hmm.
Now, should you be a smoker for you to able to execute that, or for you to feel exactly what smokers undergo,
Right.
or can you give it a shot?
So we're now going to the realm of product development, and this is where like user experience design kicks in. And what I would say is it helps, but please don't start smoking. No, so you could still design it with an outsider's perspective, right? I have gamified different situations where it is very difficult for me. There was an app to help what was that, pregnant moms, right? Keep track of their children, and also for moms who already have kids to, how do you take care of your child, to gamify their involvement in the app. As a part of that project, I am not a mom, right? I am a dad, but
Right,
I only have secondhand experience, so I'm not
right,
ideally suited for it.
right,
In the beginning, when I was struggling to make ends meet, I would take up any project. But
right.
now I have the freedom and the luxury to say no. So that's my take on it.
Got it, got it. Cool. So now I've got some questions from
Mm-hmm,
your
mm-hmm,
workshop. Very just curious. Okay, you've spoken. I think by now you've spoken about put the player first framework,
mm-hmm,
which I'm kind of okay with.
mm-hmm,
Now, have you, from your interactions with participants in your workshop, right?
mm-hmm,
If you've, I'm sure you'd have gotten feedback. They must
mm-hmm.
have you. What is their take on gamified workshops versus non-gamified workshops?
Right, right. I have strong opinions here, and that might ruffle some feathers, but I have no qualms about sharing them. I have worked with other companies, like being a facilitator as a part of their roster. I have done my own stuff. I've also built out a fully gamified approach to this thing, right? To do facilitating workshops. My biggest pet peeves are when people get you to play some games and then they say, okay, let's debrief, and then they call it a day, right? Yes, there are transferable skills that happen, but based on my experience, the learning that happens in these sort of situations is suboptimal. I think that's the polite way of putting it, right? And what I mean by that is, yes, there are certain skills that you're going to be using to play the game, right? So when you're learning the rules, when you're doing decision making and stuff like that, they will kick in. And I have run workshops like that. We played Pandemic, which is a game before the pandemic, by the way.
Wow.
At a
Okay.
Yeah. So we ran this workshop where we got people to play Pandemic, and we did like a debrief after that. Like, hey, so how was collaboration, decision making, stuff like that?
Hmm.
That was good, right? But at that time, I was a greenhorn. I wasn't mature enough to understand the nuances of this. The razzle and dazzle of game-based these things and game-based workshops, and the ratings hunting that happens with any facilitator makes it a very easy out, but over the long run it does not deliver the results, right? Because participants are more enthusiastic about playing the game, and that in many cases overshadows the learning that they can take away, right? Think about it. When they're doing a job, they're not going to be thinking about how do I get my vaccine to the Atlanta CDC. That's what was happening in the game. Instead, I found that a better way of approaching this is to use Kathy Moore's action mapping method.
Hmm.
For those who are not familiar, it's predominantly in a business context. And the plan is that you figure out what is the fundamental behavior you want to change, and what are the actions that are going to be leading up straight to that. Then you teach only stuff along those lines, right? Again, I'm paraphrasing. I'd recommend anybody and everybody reading that book. Now, that approach was a lot more practical for me in the fields that I wanted to work in. And what it ended up happening was it fell short for me because it was powerful. Yes, it was able to deliver results. And so then I was like, hey, the next level of evolution was how can I do this better? And that's when I found the Workshop Design Survival Guide or something along those lines. It's a big yellow book that, again, helped me figure out how to build better workshops. But there was still something missing. And I didn't want to go into overt gamification, because I personally believe gamification's got to be like I read this somewhere. It's got to be like makeup, right? You got to put on enough makeup so that people don't know that you're putting on makeup, or something along those lines, right?
Got it.
You need to. So gamification is just a fun way of saying customer experience design. So when you're designing this experience, you want to use the elements of games, right? I'm not talking about, hey, the hero or the monsters. That's not it. What is important is elements of games, such as the motivation, the psychology. How do you keep up the pacing? How do you weave a narrative? How do you stitch these different modules together? That is important. That is applied game design. That is the psychology behind games. It's not just, hey, come, let's play this game, and boom, you will know how to make better dishes. Like, bullshit, right? That's my take. I know there are many people out there who might not see eye to eye, and that's okay. On one hand, you would have like lectures and PPTs and stuff like that. That's on one end of the spectrum. The
Yeah.
other end of the spectrum, you have these let's play a game and you learn something. I prefer to go in a completely different vector, which is not on the scale, which is, I'm going to teach you the skills that you need, but I'm going to use the psychology behind games and game design to make sure that you are engaged in this workshop. That's my take.
Got it. Whatever you said reminded me very briefly about Twitter post from somebody that I saw. It was a thread. I think, if I'm not wrong, it's this person, South Park, or somebody, he's got this storytelling technique. He just says your story shouldn't be something and then something and then something. It's, boring. It has to be something, but something, therefore something, or something along those lines. So that's
that, I believe, is Pixar's 22-step storytelling framework.
I think so too.
I think so, because that goes along those lines. Yeah.
Right. It was I've been seeing. I was in sales briefly, so storytelling was important.
Very
And
true.
I gave it a shot, but didn't stick as much as this short thing stuck. So I just thought, whatever you said was closely related to that. So that's the reason I just brought it up. Arvind, another very interesting thing, which I haven't seen in anybody's website, was the internal marketing support that you provide, right? Which was like, wow, man. Okay, man's not only going to the workshop, he's also taking responsibility for the attendance. What's that about? Can you talk about it? I'm sure
I am uniquely gifted in this aspect because I was a former head of marketing. I know marketing inside out. I do marketing workshops. And one of the biggest, again, this goes into the process I was describing earlier, like what are the problems that learning and development heads have?
Yeah.
I've spoken to about 15, 16 of them, perhaps a bit fewer, I can't recall. And this was one of the challenges. I'm like, oh, okay, I can fix that for you. And there are very few marketers who are also workshop facilitators. So I combine these talents of mine, and voila, we have this. Again, game design kicks in here because in these pre-marketing workshops, pre-workshop marketing, I already set the stage for what's going to be happening in the workshop, right? So participants are enthusiastic about what's going to be coming up. So it helps me reframe the workshop as well.
Great. So you do your workshop, but you also have something like a pre-workshop.
No, this would be, so what I do is I record videos, talent stacking again. I record videos,
Right.
I put them all together in an email that the person can then send out, and they get to interact. If I'm using Miro, for example, then I'd probably set up like a pre-activity on Miro that people can do. And then after the workshop as well, I offer close the loop sessions. But like most of success in this business or in any business is from doing stuff that other people cannot or will not do, right? So even if my client is paying me for, let's say, 3 hours of a workshop, I would offer, and I have done this in the past, where I offer an additional 60 minutes of just Q&A, right? So anytime that they want, I will come back and deliver this free 60-minute thing. Who else would do that? It's stupid business thing. I think it's smart business. I also offer Q&A by video. So at any time, any of these participants, even after the workshop, even a year later, they can send me questions and I send them video responses, right? So I use a tool like Loom or Komodo Decks and I just send it out. Hey, cool. that's also free content for me, so I'm not complaining.
Brilliant. Yeah, another thing that I've been meaning to ask. So there is this whole, pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, were you doing online sessions even pre-pandemic?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
A few, not as many as now, but
Not
definitely
many.
a few.
Got it. So one of the things, Arvind, is it's easier engaging people. Easier or not, it's more convenient to be face to face in somebody's physical space to
Oh,
get their attention
absolutely.
and stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And it makes it so much difficult online. Now, was it a problem for you? If it was, how did you solve that?
um, I'm sorry. I'm still very raw because yesterday or day before I had a corporate workshop, and of the audience of 30 people, only I think 7 of them had their cameras on. And as the session went on, they're like, "Oh, I have meetings." I'm like, "I'm still getting paid, but this breaks my heart."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's I don't have a solution for it. One thing I have tried is to offer bribes for people who turn on their camera. And the way I do that is if you keep your camera on for the entire session, I will be giving you bonus material that the others won't have access to. So this is
Right.
tapping into fear of missing out,
Yeah.
scarcity, or fear of loss. It's a black hat technique, but I mean, if 7 people are turning on the cameras, I'm happy to do that.
Wow. Okay. I thought you were going to come up with something cool.
I'm sorry, man. I really don't have an answer for that. It's a demon I still have to defeat.
You totally have to gamify this.
Yeah.
Wow,
But
this is really
sorry, I just
seven
want to
out of
clarify
sure, sure.
just one more thing. It also depends on the audience, right? So for the younger audience, it is significantly easier because they're more responsive.
Right.
But as you get to like CXO levels, right? I mean, they have shit to do, man. You know, for them to attend a workshop is a challenge. So I still haven't found a one size fits all sort of a solution.
Got it. But going back to the previous topic of the
Mm-hmm.
attendance,
Mm-hmm.
have the L&D people come back to you and have told, wow, we've had a much larger turnout in your program than others. Has that worked? That entire pre-workshop thing that you do?
So I run 2 kinds of workshops. One are,
Okay.
of course, corporate, and I run open workshops as well.
Hmm.
Open workshops, people, because they're paying out of their own pocket, are a lot more invested in
Right.
this. But in the corporate workshops, it's sometimes the HR who nominates them, perhaps the manager, or perhaps one of the leaders who's nominating them. So the involvement is generally lower. And but the marketing stuff has helped in like signups, where instead of getting 25 signups for others, they probably get like 40, 50 signups for this. But at the end of the day, it's great to have a certain rating. Like I have like 4.5 out of 5 as an average, but that's I'm at a place of luxury where I can say that is secondary. And for me, what really matters is where people are able to apply and internalize the stuff that I'm teaching them, right? And my heart breaks when they just stop caring.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be my fault because of the workshop and the way I've designed it. It could also be a mismatch between the audience that I built it for and the audience who's there. But in most of the, because these are similar workshops that I'm running for like similar audiences across different companies, as well as in open workshops, I know for a fact when I'm doing this in open workshops, people are like jumping up and cheering, right? But here it's like one thumbs up on like Zoom or something, just that one little black box. Yeah.
So, who gets to choose if it's going to be an online workshop or a in-person
Oh,
workshop?
I do not I do not give them the choice. I say I can do this online because that's what I'm comfortable with.
Okay.
If they want me to come in person, I'm going to be charging them a whole lot more.
Of course. Right. Arvind, thank you for sharing, so
Mm-hmm.
candidly about the not so good things also, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
there will be times when you figure out what went wrong. There will be times when you don't know what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you figured out what went wrong, can you share some of the common examples that you
Uh,
thought, oh, this was so obvious, I could have done this better?
Right. Just doing a postmortem on my latest workshop that bombed, right? So one was a mismatch of the audience, right? I had designed it for somebody who has about 5 to 8 years of experience, whereas
Okay.
the people who ended up were like 15 plus, right? So instead of focusing on like facilitation and helping them reach their own conclusions, I was like, hey guys, this is how you do it. And so that's one thing.
Right.
Second thing is when you have a repeat audience, right? So if you're going and delivering the same workshop, not the same workshop, sorry, if you're delivering to the same audience, I have a very solid framework. It's a proven framework that works, but I will have to change the delivery, right? Like I can't repeat, like the story that I shared about how Put the Player First came about. I can't go ahead and repeat that every single time, right? So
Right.
that was another thing. And the third was that I need to have fun. Okay, now, look, it's going to sound extremely privileged, but I feel I can say that because I have busted my ass to get to where I am
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
right? And the thing is that if something's not fun, with ADHD, it becomes like a bazillion times worse, right?
Yeah.
And I would like dread sessions, dread doing consulting work. So once I've realized that, hey, this is there, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And of late, I've started building out a don't do list, right? A list of things that I should not be doing. I often say matcha, right? Because I am a Bangalore, I've been in Bangalore
Yeah.
the longest. I have a little painting over there that says matcha over there too. But not everybody, like selling with personality, that is something I enjoy doing. But I also realize that maybe not all audiences are suited for that. So I'm also evolving my taste and my understanding of the kind of clients I want to work with. And that helps. And one thing, this is a slight tangent, right? But one thing that I find tremendously, uh, for the lack of a better term, negative, right? I don't know whether to say distasteful or heartbreaking or upset, is that in the knowledge entrepreneur domain, right? So there are a couple of things that we need to like, as a community, if we could think about, would be like really awesome, and perhaps not partake in is like undercutting, right? So that is obviously because it has become a commoditized offering. You can literally buy training programs off the shelf and you can go and deliver it to people, right? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but this will inevitably become a race to the bottom, right? So that is a big challenge that's there in the industry. Second thing is where, and this is particularly rife in Twitter. Like imagine, okay, now there are workshops that teach you how to be an AI guru with ChatGPT. There are marketers in India who are doing this. And what have they done? Like the thing's been out for like 3 months, man, And they're like, I am a guru, I'm going to teach you. I don't have a problem with them hawking their wares in whatever way they're doing, but my concern is that these sort of duplicitous claims are going to be feeding into that complex where, hey, look, I made this much of money by doing this, you can do that too. And then they sell you the basic package and then they sell you the advanced and the premium, and it sucks. That's just not my cup of tea. I understand why people do that, because that's an easy way to make money. I've chosen not to do that. So that's the second thing. Yeah, it's a tangent that was related to where we were heading in that conversation.
Well, that's
So
cool. It was very, you know, these are important topics because the show is knowledge entrepreneurs, right? And the people, it's inevitable when you are trying to do things right and when it gets hard. It's difficult to not fall prey to the easy stuff, like you said,
yeah,
because money is also very important. So it's a balance at the end of
very
the
true.
day. Yeah. And just another question. You said, very candidly, my last workshop bombed. How did you, is that your assumption, or what's the way you figured it out? Only 7 out of 30 video on, is that how you consider it bomb? Or do you have a feedback loop where, people are giving you explicit feedback? No, man, it sucked.
So people are nice, right? So they don't have the guts to tell you to your face like, hey, this was crappy. But here are the different indicators that I used to arrive at that judgment. One was we started with 30 people, we ended with 10 after 3 hours. Okay, so
Wow.
people started dropping off. Second was the L&D person that I was in touch with, I called her up like, hey, I got a very strong vibe that people are not interested in this session. Then what happened? And she, she was a part of the session. She's like, okay, this went wrong. So getting feedback from there. And third is at the end of my workshops, I also get them to do a mini retrospective, if you will. This is what I like. This is what I wish, stuff like that. And there, people were not participating. So as a facilitator, after you've been doing this for a while, you can read the room, right? Like, so
Right,
you get that
right,
vibe.
right.
And yeah, that's how I wasn't happy at the end of it, right? Otherwise, I'm like
I
freaking
know.
charged.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Right now, see, when you have a 3-hour workshop, now let's say
Mhm.
at the end of 30 minutes or at the end of 60 minutes, people start dropping off and they don't switch on
Mhm.
their videos. How do you manage to complete it? Because there is obviously, right? I mean, irrespective of how confident you can be, how much you may not care, it does, we human beings, it affects you.
Messes you up,
So
man.
yeah, how do you, have you figured out a way to deal with that? Like, how do you successfully finish those 2 hours without being a, even worse?
Okay. I have a couple of hacks that I use. One is, when stuff like this is happening, I call for a break. I'll say, okay, everybody, let's take, we've been sitting for like about this much
Mhm.
time, 10 minutes, right? So in that 10 minutes, I quickly whip up an energizer. An energizer is a kind of an exercise which is only tangentially, perhaps, related to the core, this thing of the core learning outcome of the workshop.
Right.
And, try to get that energy and momentum going, right? At the end of the day, I, again, this goes back to my marketing background, right? So I think of the entire workshop as a customer journey, and at that time, what I'm doing is I'm mapping out the emotions of the customer, right? Like, where are they happy, where are they sad, what is happening and stuff like that. And in that situation, I can discover that, oh, okay, this needs a little bit of a bump up, this needs to be toned down. But there's a lot of improv involved as well, as in I have to think on my feet. I need to be able to adapt and figure out, oh, what could be an alternate way of making this happen. So, energizers, breaks that happen, and barring that, it's just sheer grit and perseverance, because it is nasty. Like you suddenly feel like it's not you suddenly feel, because the way I am interpreting that is, what, you're an idiot. We don't care about you. Just get the hell out
Yeah,
of here.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
And that hurts.
Yes, yeah. It's no less than the feeling that a hero of a movie whose film bombs the box office in the
Pretty
first three
much.
days, right?
Hey, but that hero makes like crores of bucks. I don't. I'm just saying, it's much easier to cry in like a Bugatti or something.
Absolutely. Cool. Arvind, I think I've had all my questions,
Awesome.
answered. I've addressed all of the things.
Hmm.
This has been like amazing because,
Thank you.
I think all of your answers were like packed. It was
Facilitator macha, what do you
brilliant stuff to kind of articulate the way you did, especially the things that uh, build first. Sorry, sell first, build later. I don't know why I'm saying
I have on my Twitter, the banner that I have is make shit people want, right? And
right.
the stuff that is scratched out is make people want shit, right? The first one, making stuff that people want, is significantly easier than making people
People
want what you
want.
built.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Great.
So
I was
that's why.
on your Twitter page, and
Mhm.
I just checked because some creators, right, they have their courses free for the first few downloads, and then they
Mhm.
price it. Yours, I just tested it; it was still
Mhm.
free. So I'd
Yeah, yeah,
encourage
yeah.
all of the people listening in,
Absolutely.
go check it out because it's got a ton of content. And
Mhm.
I think if people listen to this podcast, I don't see there's why people wouldn't go and download stuff on
Awesome.
there. So I'm
Awesome.
going to do that myself.
Fantastic.
Uh,
Thank you.
marketing has been one thing if people can crack, especially creators,
Mhm.
sky's the limit, right?
Absolutely, man.
uh yeah. So Arvind, thank you again. It
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise, mate.